Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Right Reason, where we reason rightly with our show host, really. Normally I guess I'm the host, but you're really the host of the show.
Yeah,
I just ask
okay.
questions and
Yeah,
I throw you softballs and you hit them out of the park, right?
That's okay with me.
Dr. Charlie Rice, University of Notre Dame Law School, Professor Emeritus, and still professorial duties.
True.
What do you have, like one class a semester?
Yes. Yeah.
And how are law students these days?
In debt.
Well, if you're
fine,
thinking of a career in law, you might want to consider that. Yeah. Things have changed since 1969, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I bet they have. Well, our show this entire season is about the Summa Theologica, this little wonderful collection of books here of writings of St. Thomas Aquinas. And St. Thomas is really the standard for thought and reasoning. I mean, he's been held up for centuries by different popes. I mean, if you hear of Thomism or the Thomistic thought, that is what we're talking about, along with his other writings. He's geared, as you have said a number of times in the season already. Why he's a great thinker and all that. He's about being a saint, and this is really what all of this leads to, right? At the end of the day, you can get lost sometimes in the rabbit trails of intellect and this and that, but at the end of the day, it's about being holy. Right. And being holy is being aligned with God, being with God, and God is one who created us. Right. And we are to go to. That's our destiny, our end. Right. So anything we do along those lines is the good, and anything that we do counter to those lines is the bad. Good. Is that good sum up?
That's it.
All right. You got 15, 20 minutes or so. Take it away. It's all yours. We finished up one of the shows about speculative and practical reasons we talked about last week. What does that mean? What are we talking about with that?
Well, St. Thomas discussed the intellect or reason, or the mind, intellect and reason, in two aspects. He said, he talked about it in terms of it being speculative reason, that the speculative reason has as its object being, that is, existence, being. And the first principle of the speculative reason is, to put it bluntly, that being can't be non-being. And the way to express that is the principle of non-contradiction, which is that a thing cannot be and not be at the same time under the same aspect. Mm-hmm. That coffee cup, all right, is a cup. It's also white. It's cylindrical, all right? Mm-hmm. It could also be a dart. You could throw it, all right? Mm-hmm. You could be a shovel. You go out and dig with it. But in terms of its coffee cup-ness, in terms of its cup-ness, it can't be and not be.
The nature of what it is.
That's exactly right. And what St. Thomas says is that we can know the nature of things. We can know the essence of things through our reason, as we've gone into before. Sure. Contemporary culture says, no, you can't. No, the reason can't arise above the empirical. This has been Benedict XVI's, one of his main points, that the problem with this culture is that it limits reason to empirical knowledge. Mm-hmm. And therefore any knowledge beyond the empirical or scientific is by definition non-rational, and therefore to be excluded from the public discourse.
Why do you think the line is drawn there by, just average contemporary man? I mean, we talked about earlier, off camera at one point, that, when it comes to objective truth, contemporary man is all for objective truth when it comes to, hey, it's the 15th and I'm supposed to get my paycheck today. Right. There's no, well, we don't know that. I know. I want my pay, and it's objective truth. I worked my 40 hours, I want my pay. Yeah. So they draw a line. It isn't total denial of objective truth. It's only in this empirical, you can stick it under a microscope or you can prove it on a calculator. Why is the line drawn there?
It goes back a few centuries. I mean, Father Frank Canavan, the great Jesuit, had a phrase. He said that we are living through the fag end, the dying end of the Enlightenment, which is the effort by the politicians to build a society as if God does not exist. Mm-hmm. And the idea here is that God and any statements about God are non-rational. And we limit ourselves. Science has become the God.
Mm-hmm.
And Benedict was emphatic about this.
Mm-hmm.
He said, science has become the God, so that we have adopted essentially the idea that the only things that are true are the things that can be demonstrated scientifically or empirically.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't demonstrate the truth of that scientifically or empirically.
Right.
So that the dictatorship of relativism is based on an absurdity, but it comes back to the flight from God.
Mm-hmm.
From faith and reason. It comes back. This is a culture that's lost not only its faith but its mind, because you're saying that reason can't reach not only truth about God but truth about morality.
Right.
At all. And St. Thomas, when he was talking about this principle of speculative reason and practical reason, said that in terms of the principle of contradiction, the thing can't be and not be at the same time under the same aspect. He said it is impossible for a particular moral act, this act by this guy at this time, to be both right and wrong,
right.
Morally right and wrong. It can be indifferent,
mm-hmm.
whether you get coffee or tea usually. But he said this applies to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the other way he looked at reason was the practical reason,
mm-hmm.
where the practical reason relates to action, to conduct. And first principle of the practical reason, or the object of the practical reason, is the good.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And you ask people, you say, if you go up and you ask people, say, hey, what does it mean that something is good? Oh, it's nice.
Yeah.
All right,
It's
I
nice,
like
yeah.
it. All right. What does a good mean? And that's the object. The first principle is that the good is what all things seek.
Mm-hmm.
Notice he says all things. So the dog, you give him the brick and the hamburger, he's going to go for the hamburger. All right? And the grass grows up between the concrete cracks, seeking its own good. And the question is, what does it mean to say something is good? And here's where we get into a further collision with the contemporary culture. Because what Thomas is saying can be illustrated by example, if you have a friend who's got the hood of his car up, holding 2 cans, oil and molasses. All right? You say, hey, Freddie, what are you doing? Trying to decide which one to put in my car.
Yeah.
All right? If you're a real friend of his, what would you tell him? you say, look stupid. put the oil in the crankcase, all right? And it's not good to put molasses in your car.
Right.
And he goes and he says, well, who are you to tell me what to do with my car? And so on and so forth. It's my car, my body,
Yeah.
Glove compartment, he looks in the manual, it says, do not put molasses in the crankcase. And notice this, that the 10 Commandments are simply specifications of the natural law.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the manufacturer's directions in the glove compartment.
Right.
But so is the entire natural law. And so if he puts the molasses in the crankcase of his car, he's a pedestrian.
Mm-hmm.
Because the natural law is the story of how things work.
Sure.
And the good is that which is in accord with the nature of the thing.
A priest I knew used to say, with regard to people acting badly, immorally, he would say, well, God is forgiving, but nature isn't.
Nature isn't. That's right.
Nature isn't. You break the natural law, He gave a wonderful example, which really was one of those kind of like ta-da moments. It's very simply expressed, but it's like, oh, he said, when someone jumps off a cliff, they're not defying the law of gravity, they're proving it.
Yeah, right.
What a great way to sum that up. That's exactly true. So it is. But there does seem to be this great reticence to see, this is so simple. It really is.
But it's true.
It's simple, it's true, it's just there. I mean, a 4-year-old understands this. By the time that 4-year-old turns 40, all of a sudden now it's all obscured. But
yeah, but you see, it goes back to what Benedict said at Regensburg, that one of the main problems with this culture is the refusal to recognize that reason can know anything beyond the empirical.
Yep.
Reason is limited to the empirical. So we can't know anything beyond that. And Jeremy,
it's a deep problem.
Oh, it is.
It's a deep problem to live in that kind of world.
It goes back to the the philosophers. Hans Kelsen said that reason can't know anything about the absolute, cannot know objective truth. He said, and this is a quote, he said, justice is an irrational ideal. All right? He's a jurisprudence guy.
Yeah.
And therefore, he said, any law enacted cannot be criticized as unjust. So this is a culture that has lost its mind.
So what does he say about the Nuremberg laws?
He went to, he wrote articles after the Second World War. He's an honest guy. And he said, the Nazi concentration camps, the Soviet Gulag, were valid law. We may not like them, but we can't criticize them as unjust. So that's going throughout.
He just doesn't have a conception of justice.
He says the mind is incapable of reaching it. See, and what St. Thomas tells us is that you can know the essence of things. You can know the essence of a human being. So you can know that it is good, in accord with the nature of that human being, to have, as we did a short time ago, a ham sandwich for lunch. All right.
Sorry.
It's not good to have a barbed wire sandwich. All right, and you can know that with your reason. But the question comes up: okay, if the good is that which all things seek, and the first principle of the natural law is seek the good and avoid evil, and we know what the good of an automobile is. You don't put molasses in the crankcase. All right. What's the good of human beings?
What is the good of human beings?
Well, Thomas got into that. And he said, we know in a connatural, practically self-evident way that there are basic inclinations of human nature that are good. That we know they're good in accord with our nature. What would they be? First of all, seek the good, including your highest good, who is God. Secondly, to preserve yourself, self-preservation. Third would be to unite sexually, to have children. Why? It's a third inclination is to preserve the species. You know it is good to do that. The fourth is to live in community. That's why solitary confinement is such an onerous punishment.
Yeah.
All right? And the fifth is to use our intellect and our will, the faculties of our soul, to know and to choose. And this, is these are the basic inclinations of human nature. What we'll get into next time is, okay, what do we do with those?
Yeah, the question of morality.
Yeah. I mean, how do we make moral decisions? I mean, free choice. The human being is free. John Paul and Benedict have emphasized this, that moral choices have to be made in freedom. And Solzhenitsyn, who was the great Soviet writer, said that one of the most onerous punishments they inflicted on him in solitary confinement was the rule that when he lay down in this cell where the guard was watching continually, if he was allowed to lie down and he couldn't put his hands under the covers. Why was that so onerous? Because they were denying his humanity.
Sure.
Because they were denying him even the right to make that choice. So we'll get into that next time and say, okay, what do we do with these inclinations, and how do we decide what is or is not right or wrong? And what role does conscience play in this?
There has to be. We'll get to the question of there has to be a source outside of us that we can measure ourselves by.
Correct.
Measure
as Benedict said in one of his encyclicals, if man ever gets the point where he decides that he has to make justice. He says he's in a mess.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
in certain circumstances, that has we've already
true.
reached that point, and we're in a mess. Dr. Charles Rice from the University of Notre Dame, law school professor emeritus, and more than that, though, all-around great scholar, great guy.
Keep going.
Now, I've said this before. He's the first living human being whose cause for canonization has already been sent to the Vatican. It's amazing. He's performed a couple of miracles already.
No kidding.
Well, through you.
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Well,
that.
they kind of keep that a little private for you right now.
Yeah. They haven't even told me.
Next week on Right Reason, Dr. Rice will be here, and we'll be talking about morality. How do we know? Here's a choice. How do we know what's moral and immoral, and what we should choose, and how we should choose, and consequences of it, and all of that? And it's all right here in St. Thomas's Summa Theologica, which is what we're dedicating this season to, and it's actually a very good, very good information to know. It's simple.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
I know.
It's expressing all this stuff, but it's very simple. Very simple. Doctor, thank you very much. Okay. God bless. We'll see you next week on Right Reason.